Hi, everyone. Thank you all for attending today. I'm Nicole Jarvis. I'm Senior Manager of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I'll be your host for today's 60-minute webinar. Next slide, please. So before we begin, just a few housekeeping items related to accreditation. Today's webinar is accredited for CEUs by ANCC, NASW, the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work, the California Board of Registered Nursing, and the Society for Human Resource Management. If you plan on receiving continuing education credit for this program or a general certificate, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must log in individually. Participants who listen in on someone else's line will not receive credit. Second, you must complete and submit the evaluation and post-test, as well as obtain a passing grade on the post-test, which is 80%. Following today's session, you'll receive an email with all of this information. This email will be sent by 5 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, Thursday, June 3rd, and certificates will be emailed within 4 to 6 weeks. Also, please note that the planners and presenters for this program have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and that no commercial support was provided for this program. Next slide, please. Thanks in part to direct support from Genentech, HSN, and QVC, Cancer and Careers is able to offer the 7th year of Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series. This program was created to provide patients and survivors, as well as their care teams and employers, with concise, targeted information around the work-related issues that may arise after a cancer diagnosis. Next slide, please. Additionally, we'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing resources and services free of charge. Next slide, please. Now, today we're focusing on a specific element of the job search process, networking. Networking tends to be a skill that many people feel nervous about in general. This last year, social distancing has also made the process of networking feel just a little bit different as well. But today we're going to cover the basics of networking, why it's important, and how to effectively network, whether you're able to do so in person or will need to continue to do so from a distance. But regardless of the format that you network in, it's critical to get comfortable with it, as it's an essential aspect of job searching and has shown time and again it's a crucial tool for getting a job. Even if you aren't actively job searching right now, networking can aid in creating future prospects if you do decide to switch jobs or go back to work at a later date. Now, we do understand each of you may have further questions today, so we'll have some time for those at the end of the hour. All questions that you want answered should be entered into the Q&A box, which is either located on the top or bottom of your screen. Please do not ask questions for Julie in the chat box, as we won't be monitoring it for that. If you are joining us via phone today, you can press *9, which will alert us of your question. So to take us through this topic, I'm thrilled to introduce Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who's helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work. She's written 2 books, but most important to us, Julie is one of the original coaches at CAC. She's been helping patients and survivors with their individual employment challenges for years now. Additionally, Julie is the coach who does our resume review service. So during this session, Julie's going to be providing strategies for successful networking that you'll be able to use during COVID-19 and beyond. As I mentioned, following the presentation, there will be time for you to ask questions, but for now, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to get us started. Julie?
Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate it. So, networking is a big topic. Let's just talk, on the next slide, let's just talk about the benefits of the pandemic. As Nicole mentioned, it certainly has changed a lot of the way that we communicate, the format, much of it being video. It almost seems as if people have veered away from the old-fashioned phone even. And so some of the benefits that I've seen, and maybe you have too, is that there's been an accelerated climate of connectivity and caring. COVID-19 has shown us that we truly need each other. We have much to give to others, whether it's recognition, appreciation, advice, or assistance. And it's really, I'll stress this throughout this webinar, that really the crux of effective networking is about giving to others. And if you're in that mode, you'll find the whole process much easier. But that said, no doubt that many of you have been contacted by people in the last 16 months whom you haven't talked to in years. I know I have. And you probably reached out to people you haven't talked to in years, and you kind of feel a little bit more comfortable doing it than during normal times. And so what's really reassuring to everybody is your relationships and your connections with others. So as Nicole mentioned, today's webinar is going to dig into the to-dos of networking that are effective no matter what, as well as specific tips for networking virtually. And as she said, we'll have some time for Q&A. Let me first say, before going to the next slide, let me first say that networking is the single most important skill that I've developed, which has made me successful in my business, enhanced my personal life through starting my business, personal crises, 9/11, the Great Recession, and the pandemic. So let's dig into what networking actually is on the next slide. So networking, one back, Brian, thanks. Networking is an ongoing, interactive process of creating and nurturing productive relationships. And let me say, just like any relationship, there's no such thing as 50-50. So sometimes it may feel to you, especially for example, if you're in a job search, it may feel to you like you're reaching out. You're the one making all the effort. You're the one trying to talk to people and help people. But it does kind of come around. And what's the statistics show, they don't lie, 85% of jobs are found through networking. That's a huge percentage. 80% of jobs are what are called the hidden job market. The hidden job market is, actually jobs that are not posted, jobs that are not advertised, jobs that may not even exist, but they're going to happen. And there's a statistic, there's an author named Mark Victor Hansen, and he said, the average person, believe it or not, even if you don't feel like it, knows at least 250 people. Each of those 250 people know 250 people. Actually, you ultimately have access to 62,500 people, and LinkedIn makes it really a lot easier. And then finally, 30% of jobs are created through someone you know. However, as Nicole mentioned, it's tough to network for a lot of people. So let's look at the slides that talk about barriers. So the first barrier seems kind of obvious. It's your attitude. And I don't mean that you have a bad attitude about networking, not at all, although some people do. I have seen that. But you might have just a fear of doing it. What's going to happen? What do I say? Or just a general discomfort. Networking can be misunderstood. It can be underutilized. It can be not attacked in the proper way. So if you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to get rejected, or I'm going to be needy. I hear that a lot. I don't want to be needy. I want to be able to help myself. I don't like asking people for help, or I don't want to bother someone. I hear that so many times. You've got to kind of move on about that. By approaching strangers or asking for help, automatically you feel like you're putting yourself at risk for non-acceptance, which isn't true. And usually when someone doesn't respond to your efforts for networking, it's not personal. They're not rejecting you. There can be a lack of understanding about how to network, which is why those of you who have jumped on this webinar is like, what is its value? How does it really work? What are the do's and don'ts? The mentality that you can do something all on your own. Well, we can't do things all on our own. We need other people. And then there's also a lack of confidence. I know I've felt this way about approaching really senior people or people that you don't know. The other barriers to successful networking on the next slide are your ability to manage your time during the process and your ability to stay organized. I mean, if you're not generally an organized person, it's a struggle because you've got to look for people, document who they are, document conversations, document follow-up. And obviously there's a lot of technology tools that can help you to do that. So I do recommend using the simplest digital system. I mean, some people like Excel, which might not be my favorite tool, but if it works, it doesn't matter. I mean, I see people tracking their networking conversations just using a notebook. still, lots of people still use notebooks. But as Ken Blanchard said, managing your time isn't the real issue because your time is fixed. What you need is to manage the activities that are actually consuming your time. And one more key fact is that most people don't network as often when they're working. If this is true of you, and at some point, like Nicole mentioned when she kicked this off, if you need to look for another job someday down the road, it's a lot harder to revisit your network than it would have been if you had stayed in touch with everyone on a regular basis. And the interesting thing about networking is that we all do it naturally in our personal lives. I mean, how many times have you asked, where did you buy that? Who's your accountant? Have you tried that online meal delivery service? This is simple networking. And for some reason, people have difficulty transferring this to their professional or work lives unless they absolutely have to. And I don't need to tell you that in this era of social distancing, which we're moving out of eventually, learning how to network digitally and virtually has become a necessity. But the basic principles of networking have not changed in the entire existence of mankind. All right, now let's kick into the 5 sources of networking. The first source is your personal and your professional network. So often someone will say to me, I'll say, well, what kind of network do you have? Oh, I don't know anybody. Everybody in my network works in my industry. I hear that quite often. But you do have contacts. And if you're able to structure your current contacts in buckets or categories, that makes it a lot easier. So while you might not feel like you have a large and meaningful network, if you think about friends, people you went to high school or college with, your kids' friends' parents, anybody who provides a service to you, a doctor, a dentist, a hairstylist, an insurance broker, they all have clients and patients and customers. And open up a Word document and just start writing them down and start thinking about people. Search for these people on LinkedIn or friend them on Facebook. And then from now on, this is a really key point. When you talk to someone new, if you're on LinkedIn and you have a LinkedIn membership, automatically invite them to connect on LinkedIn. So that segues us to the next source of the 5 sources, and that's LinkedIn. I did a LinkedIn webinar recently. Maybe some of you attended it. If you're someone who's resistant to using LinkedIn, as I've said before, it's time to overcome it. You can use it in a very simplistic way. But let's talk about it. We know it's the most widely used business-oriented social network in the world. It's grown immensely. It's owned by Microsoft. It's 650 million people in 200 countries. And it's not just a database. There's a lot of good information on LinkedIn. So networking on LinkedIn is not about large numbers of people, but making meaningful relationships. Once you have your focus on what it is that you want to look for, like say you're trying to change careers and you want to get into a different field, it's great to look on LinkedIn for people who are doing what you'd like to do. So, and during the pandemic, I'll tell you, I have seen thousands and thousands of people jump on LinkedIn and use it who had never used it before. They kind of put their nose in the air and said, I don't need to use LinkedIn. And then they realized it's a wonderful tool. So update your profile, ask your connections for recommendations about you. Recommendation is similar to an old-fashioned reference, but it lives on your LinkedIn profile, and it's a nice little add-on that adds some color. Join some groups, comment on your connections posts, or you can just like your connections posts. Sometimes I just do that, and ask your connections how you can actually help them. So that's LinkedIn. Influential people. So that doesn't mean that you need to be reaching out to President Joe Biden, but influential people are influential in their chosen field or industry. It could be someone who's running a professional association or a trade association. Consultants, people that offer consulting services, they are dealing with a lot of people. So they know a lot of people. Salespeople, people who sell. I don't care what they sell. I don't care if someone sells. I had someone reach out to me who sells Teslas, and he probably meets a lot of really interesting people and knows a lot of interesting people and could make some nice connections. And even people that work in the government, heads of nonprofits. Those are people who just through their day-to-day jobs, they reach out to a lot of people. They're much more comfortable making connections. So think about a few of those people that you might know. Now there's people and companies in the media. So what that is people who have been promoted, people who have changed positions and changed companies. And there's lots of different places where these people can be found, you know, whether it's business articles. I know there's the business journals all across the United States, because everybody on this webinar is from a different place. I live in Connecticut. We have a Fairfield County business journal. There's a Westchester County business journal, which is in New York, and they're all over the United States. There's also in those journals and those types of papers, there's lots of local ones. There's lots of calendars of events. Obviously, a lot of them are still virtual. And so those are great places to just check out people and say, that person looks interesting. Let me reach out to them. Now, no matter what your profession is, you have a trade or professional association or organization. So on this next slide, you can see that, I mean, I don't care if you believe it or not, there's a job, an occupation determining the sex of chickens, because it's very hard to do that. So there's people that do that. There's people who are diamond graders. There's people who work in circuses, and there's lots of, you know, accounting. No matter what, there is a group. And so look for those groups, even if it's an industry that you don't yet work in, but you'd like to. Guaranteed there's a professional group, a networking organization. And also a lot of you are interested or members of civic or cultural, religious, government groups. And those are anything where there's commonality. People are going to be much more open to helping, and even activity groups, people who cycle, you know, people who are into archery, sailors are big, whatever it is, it's lots and lots of groups, and there's a quantity, which is great. So the next source is recruiters and search firms. I get a lot of questions about recruiters and search firms. So I just want to kind of give you a quick overview. So what happens with recruiters and search firms is they tend to place people and companies in openings who are similar to the position that they're placing. So recruiters and search firms rarely help career changers. So if you're a career changer, it's going to be highly unlikely that you will be able to get interviews through recruiters or search firms. And generally, recruiters and search firms kind of separate by the salaries of the people that they place, whom they place. Search firms or retained search firms, executive search firms, they tend to have to get paid by their client up front to find a person. But the best way to find recruiters is a couple really good ways. Recruiters don't tend to be responsive if they don't think that they have openings that they can present you for. So don't be offended. People are always so offended, but that's just, they're bombarded, and so they can't respond to everybody. It would be nice if they did, but they don't. So ask your network, if in your industry, have you talked to a recruiter over the years whom you would be willing to refer me to? And remember, again, I can't stress this enough, that recruiters only place or interview candidates who are fit for jobs. So those are the 5 sources for networking. So moving on to how do you invite people to network with you, whether it's video or phone, or, you know, eventually it'll be in person. Let's talk about some specific skills that you can develop to use so that you can feel more natural, and even more important, that you can be effective. So with rare exception, I send an email, I text someone, I invite people to connect on LinkedIn, I comment on LinkedIn posts or updates, and I even make occasional phone calls that are just about networking. It's a habit. And if you develop that habit, it will become ingrained. And it's kind of rewarding and fulfilling to reach out to someone whom you haven't talked to in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or even a year. So here's some guidelines. Think about what it is you need. And I'm assuming that a lot of you are taking this webinar because you're interested in finding a new job or changing careers. And if that's the case, maybe 10 people is a lot, but reach out to 10 people over the next 2 weeks whom you know well, or you haven't talked to in a long time, or even who you'd like to meet. And they may have information, they may have a resource, they may have insight on whatever your specific need is. And in the first sentence, now likely it's writing. So in the first sentence, explain what you're looking for, why there's someone that you're reaching out to. We worked together in the past. You're familiar with the industry. I've admired what you've done and achieved. And explain that first, right away, up front. The next thing you want to do is compliment them. And I don't mean to be artificial, but something specific, like I've been watching you from afar, or I've enjoyed, a lot of people will say to me, I enjoy your posts on LinkedIn. They seem pretty thoughtful. Just make it clear that you don't want to waste their time. And then provide a very, very brief description of your background and what your goals are. And then on the next slide, continuing to talk about inviting people to network with you, offer format options. Not everybody wants to do a Zoom meeting, especially if they don't know you that well or they haven't talked to you in a long time. You can also offer to send your questions to the person ahead of time in an email, but keep it brief. And if you can, think of an interesting subject line to maximize the likelihood that the person will read the message, and try to think of that. Subject lines are hard for people, but if you create some ahead of time, when you're feeling creative, you can kind of use those subject lines over and over again. Okay, so moving on to my favorite theme of networking, reciprocity. Reciprocity is key to successful networking. It's, in my opinion, the most important thing to remember about networking. The essence of networking, excuse me, we have pollen here, and I just flew back from Arizona late last night, and all of a sudden I'm having allergy issues again in Connecticut. The essence of networking is focusing on the other person instead of you. So yeah, if you have an agenda or a specific need, that's fine. You don't want to necessarily jump right in and talk about what your need is or what your agenda is. Your priority should always be the other person first. So people know intuitively when you're trying to identify with them and when you aren't. So be sincere. Don't ask them how they are if you don't really care, or you're not going to listen, or you can't respond appropriately. So a big part of empathy is asking thoughtful questions and really paying attention to their answers. And if you do that, then you'll feel much more comfortable with the timing of when you can introduce your own agenda. And this is what makes networking interactive instead of one-sided. And be sure about your expertise, your skills, what kind of resource you could be to them. And it's okay to say, I would like to help you. Networking is two-way, and I would like to help you. I'm just not sure what it would be now, but know that that's important to me. And don't expect anything from people. As I like to say, and maybe I'll say this again later, you don't have chemistry with everybody, and that's okay. You're always surprised by who helps you and who doesn't. So making small talk and conversation. For people, half the population who are introverted, that's a hard thing to do sometimes. Developing the skill of small talk and conversation is just as important online, on video, and in an email, frankly, if not more so. It's harder in those formats to come across as approachable, to create rapport, and to develop trust. And so that's where small talk and conversation is really important to kick in. And so I just suggest practicing it. And needless to say, I can't believe I should even say this, but boy, I've made this mistake myself. Politics, religion, and vaccine discussions, or even COVID at this point, verboten, as they say in German. Do not speak about those if you can avoid it. Okay, so a little more about making small talk and conversation. I developed some kind of questions that you could think about asking, and you can ask whatever you'd like, but kind of fun questions. What was your very first job? Now that's a good question if you're talking to someone who's in a career that you'd like to shift into. What are you binging on Netflix? I mean, I still meet the occasional person who's very proud that they don't watch television, but most people, their guilty pleasure has been Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, etc., Apple Plus. What's your favorite comfort food? Where's the last place you've traveled? Well, I just made my first trip to Phoenix to visit my family. It was awesome. Got back last night, as I mentioned, and people like to talk about travel, like where they're going to go or where they were last. And then life story. What's one of your hidden talents? Maybe you don't want to ask it like that because it might sound a little strange, but just think about some questions ahead of time, similar to thinking about small talk and making conversation. Okay, so I had mentioned when we were talking about the barriers to networking, I had mentioned that people get nervous about, interacting with people who are senior or people who seem like they've accomplished more, and they're people too. So just I like the direct approach. The direct, while it's ideal if you can get introduced by someone, that's not always the case. But remember to try to reach out to your network to get introduced to someone if you can. And then if you do approach them, say, Julie, I'm approaching you because I really appreciate your advice, your input, your insight. Or even say, I haven't been great about building my network. So I'm working at expanding my network, and I'd love it and be honored if you could be part of it. And again, similar to what I mentioned before, be clear about what your skills or expertise is. Always have a simple little agenda, whether it's in your mind or you've written it down. But also remember that, and also what I was going to say is remember that, it's not just senior people who can help you. When we often think that that's the case. While they might be able to help you, just because they're senior doesn't mean they will. So it's just as important to get to know those influencer people and less obvious decision makers. So let's segue into networking etiquette. So never assume that people are acknowledged or appreciated. We forget to compliment people. We forget to acknowledge people. We forget to say, hey, you did a good job, or that was really interesting, the way you approached that. So my rule of thumb is if I've spent 15 minutes or more with someone, I follow up. I acknowledge them either in a text or an email, or if I'm not connected on LinkedIn, which I should be, as I mentioned earlier, every new person connect with them on LinkedIn and customize your invitation, by the way. And if you say you'll do something as a follow-up to your conversation, please do it. Don't drop the ball and not do it, because networking is about keeping the conversation moving, keeping the relationship going. Okay. And also, there are mistakes that people make. We've all made them. I've made them. Not making it easy for your networking contact to help you. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. So, hi, Julie, in an email. My name is so-and-so. Nicole Jarvis recommended that I give you a call or send you an email because I'm trying to get into marketing. And I say, oh, hi, it's nice to meet you. How do you know Nicole? And the person will say, I just happened to talk to her on the phone through Cancer and Careers. And I'll say, okay, well, now I have to start doing work. I have to find out, well, what does marketing mean? Marketing is a huge functional area, huge. There's like so many different jobs in marketing, and it could be marketing in a specific industry. So now I'm, well, what kind of marketing? Well, I can do any kind of marketing. I'm very creative. Now I'm starting to feel exhausted already because I have to keep digging and get the person to be specific about what kind of help they're actually looking for. And so that makes it very challenging for the person you're networking with. So just make sure that you really hone in on, whether it's these are the kinds of people I'd like to meet, or this is the type of job, these two jobs I'm looking at, and I'd like to learn more about them, or whatever it is. And I'm sort of, talking a lot about this because I see this mistake quite often. Forgetting that reciprocity is fundamental to the networking process. So we talked about that already quite a bit. Just promise me that the next time you reach out to someone, you make small talk, and then you try to dig a little bit and see what they need. I mean, it is very few people who network with me who will say, Julie, you've been in your own business, it looks like for quite a long time. Is there a certain kind of client that you look for? I rarely ever hear someone offer that assistance to me. Maybe they think I have it all figured out, but I don't. Nobody does. Disappearing after meeting or talking with someone, even if you think, oh, I don't know, Julie's probably not the right person for me to, interact with, or maybe it doesn't seem like she wants to help or can help. Don't disappear. Just follow up, close the loop. Hey, it was so great. I appreciated your time. Oh, and I know something that someone did with me recently that really made me a little irritated. When this person was networking with me, they didn't look at my website, and they were trying to become a coach. And they didn't look at my website. I said, well, did you get a chance? I didn't say, you don't assume that everybody looks at my website, but I said, did you get a chance to review my website? And this wasn't like we had made the appointment, the next day. And this was a phone conversation. And she said, no, I didn't. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe she didn't have time. That's fine. And then I said to her, well, do you have any questions? Anything that I can answer, because I'd love to help you, but I don't know how to help you. So to the first point of not making it easy for your networking contact to help. And she said, no, I really don't have any questions. Now, let me tell you something. This is a very senior HR person. So not someone who shouldn't have known better, and then forgetting to lighten up. Yeah, you may feel like in dire straits because you need a job, you want a job, you need to earn, you're upset about losing your job because of COVID or because of your diagnosis, which we hear quite a bit at Cancer and Careers. All of that is real for you, but people tend to like to interact with people who aren't as intense, who aren't as serious. And it's okay for you to acknowledge that, you're concerned, or you've got a little bit of anxiety or whatever, but also just be lighthearted and joke a little bit. And we all know that the best kind of humor is making fun of yourself. So those are some of the common networking mistakes. We'll talk just briefly. I'm sure you've already all figured this out. Nicole and I kind of debated about this, like, do we leave the video thing in? But yeah, we're stuck with video. And in fact, and I don't mean stuck because that sounds like it's negative. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But in fact, it's a great added venue. While some of us have used Skype for years, I certainly use Zoom, not on the level that I do now, and some of the other platforms, but not to this intensity. So communicating with video for most people makes you feel like you're with that person more so. But it's a good idea for you to keep video meetings shorter. So when the pandemic hit and I realized what was going on with all the coaching I do, I started offering half-hour coaching meetings. And I'll tell you something, most of my clients grabbed them. Also, it was financially better for them, but they loved the fact that it was 30 minutes, packed with an agenda, got to make it as productive and effective as possible. And truth be told, I love those too, much more than an hour. So then some more about communicating with video. We know this, we've all had our snafus. I've had plenty with technology. There's a lot of technology that you're using. So something will inevitably, if I can talk, go wrong. Clutter behind you. I still see weird things behind people. There are backgrounds on all of the, on Zoom and Teams and most of the formats. And some of the backgrounds are, like an ocean or conference rooms, or I don't even know when the next time is we'll sit in a large conference room. But that said, just be thoughtful about it. And maybe you can ask someone for feedback and do a practice session if you're still not really comfortable with Zoom and, seeing what your background is. I've actually asked people, because in my living room, there's this giant picture of a cow. And I've said to people, is that distracting? And almost everybody comments on it. I've only had one person say, oh, that cow creeps me out. Well, now I know that I'm not going to ever do a meeting with her with the cow behind me. And then just large light sources are tough. So those are some things about communicating with video. And then just one more slide about this. make sure you put your laptop or your device so that you're kind of doing the head and shoulders view. There's lots of risers that you can buy. I'm using one right now. And it's hard to make eye contact because, you know, the camera is on, if you're using a laptop, it's on top of there. When I FaceTime my best friend and her husband, they live in Florida, I don't use a lot of Apple equipment, and the camera's in a different place, and her husband's constantly saying, Julie, the camera, it's over there. Julie, the camera, you're not looking at the camera. He's always reprimanding me. So it is a challenge, but we know that we all kind of suffer from the same things. And if you're using notes, place them adjacent to the screen if you can. Okay, so how do you stay in touch with your network? It's easy to just think, I don't have anything else to say. I mean, particularly in the past 15 months or so, you know, we're now all starting to kind of get out there and do things and actually go out to eat and things like that. But we felt like we didn't have a life. And how much can you talk about, you know, making bread or all the things that people were doing? You know, you can just reach out and say hi. It's okay, and ask how they are. But maybe don't say, how are you? I stopped asking people, how are you during the pandemic, and now I don't think I'll ever say that again. Share good news if you have anything, even if it's something really small. Invite people to a meeting, a yoga class. Actually, I got invited to a virtual wine tasting. This morning, I got a call from someone, I want you to come to a virtual wine tasting. I won an award with my company, and I was like really honored. And they actually ship a bottle of wine to everybody. I was all excited in June, so that's cool. Send an article or a blog post. I do that a lot, actually, with my clients in particular. Ask for advice. I was thinking about you, and you're pretty skilled at this. I was wondering if I could just ask you. Don't say pick your brain, because somehow that has a weird connotation. Send the person a link to a book title or a video or a podcast. Other ways that you can stay in touch with your network, invite them for a virtual coffee or drink. I mean, that sort of seems to have plateaued a bit. The people are not that gung-ho about eating and drinking virtually, which I get. Share competitive information. I know my clients love that when I say, I don't say the company name, but I say, well, in your industry, I'm working with one of your competitors and this is what they're doing. Forward an online newsletter. There's still plenty of newsletters that are published. Give them an update if you're in a job search or career transition. You were so kind to help me. I just wanted to give you an update. I had a round of interviews with this company, and unfortunately it didn't work out, but I learned a lot about myself. You know, introduce someone to someone in your network. I did that recently, and it felt so good. I just was able to put two people together, and they really clicked, which doesn't always happen. Send people target lists of companies. I ask people to do that a lot. Like if they're in a job search and they're reaching out to me, just send me 5 companies and let me see if I can look on LinkedIn and find someone whom I might know. And then finally, networking. I can't stress it enough. It's always been important. It always will be important. I don't care what is going on in the world. And as I mentioned when we kicked off, the pandemic has actually created more opportunities for you to network. It's made it, in some ways, a little bit more comfortable. Ultimately, I know for a fact from my own life and my own work and my own experience, when you're a strong networker, you will be approached more regularly, believe it or not, with requests and opportunities. So networking is about a way of life, not just an activity or something you need to do to find your next job. You will eventually be able to network in person again, and all of the tips that we discussed during this webinar will absolutely still apply. Back to Nicole.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Julie. I know that's a lot of information for everyone to process, but it really is a great foundation from which to start for some really useful tools for those who are ready to get out there and network, or who are just a little bit more curious about what it entails. So really quickly before we head into the Q&A, I just do want to point out on the next slide a few of Cancer and Careers resources that might be helpful for everyone who's job searching, and even those who aren't quite there yet but are looking in for some more information. We have our resume review service, which Julie does the reviews for those. We also have our career coaching center, where you can submit a question to a career coach, of which Julie is one of our career coaches as well. we have our job search toolkit and our free job search tools that are all available on our website. If you go to the next slide, you can see that we do have a number of upcoming events, more of our Balancing Work and Cancer webinars, which includes enhancing your skills and career change, which could definitely be used in conjunction with today's information. And then, of course, we also have our national conference coming up at the end of this month on June 25th. Registration is still available. There's space still available. And since it is virtual this year, we're hoping that it may be more accessible to those who have not been able to join us in the past in person. So I will open it up now for questions. Just a reminder, any questions that you have can be submitted into the Q&A box, or if you are on the phone, you can press *9. So I will give you all a minute in case you have any questions that are coming up now. I do see that we have a couple, so I'll just go through those now, Julie, and you just you let me know when you are all set. Okay, so this one is from John. John asks, what can I do to build my confidence? I've tried networking and just feel like it always hits a dead end, especially when it's time to kind of close the deal and move forward a little bit. So I'm having a lot of trouble getting back into it. What would you suggest are ways that I could build my confidence?
Okay. Yeah, and it's definitely a situation that many people find themselves in, John. And so the first thing I would say is, with anything that seems intimidating or overwhelming, you want to start small and start where you're the most comfortable. So it may well be just, practicing with your best friend or a family member and just kind of reaching out and saying, hey, I need to get into this networking thing. And can I just kind of, talk to you a little bit about, this is what I would say, or this is what I would ask for, or this is what I would ask you. And then do that a little bit, and then start this baby steps, just reaching out to people who are in your work network, or maybe people you went to school with, and then just kind of start branching out. And I really do believe that the more frequently, like if you said to yourself, I'm going to have a conversation every day that's just about networking. Mm-hmm. And the more frequently you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be. And just remember that you're not always every single time going to hit it out of the park with getting what you need in a networking meeting. Sometimes you'll just have this nice meeting and then walk away and go, oh, darn, I didn't really ask for anything. I didn't get anything. But that's okay, because it kind of is cumulative, and it'll move you to finally that person who will give you that, shed light on an opportunity or a person you can connect to.
Absolutely. And I think, the confidence aspect is common among people with cancer and looking for jobs in general. If you've been out of touch for a while, or if there are certain things that you can't do anymore. So I think just any kind of actions that you can take to build your confidence will really help overall in the job search process, but especially in networking. So
yeah, and it's if I may add to the confidence piece, Nicole, I think it's also it's not just confidence about networking. I mean, it's just sort of lots of things that you can do to build your confidence as a human being, like trying new things and making sure you're reaching out to your small fan club on a regular basis, doing things that make you feel good. And all of that just does help build your confidence overall.
And I mean, even just speaking with people that you've worked with in the past who can give you some good ideas about, what it was like to work with you, and kind of working off of that can be helpful. Yeah. I think using all of the resources that might not be totally obvious is a really important thing to remember. We have a question from Ellen. What do I say to someone who might be interested in services? I tend to get flustered. I'm guessing maybe they have their own business. It says, what do I say to someone who might be interested in services? I tend to get very flustered.
What does services mean, do you think?
I'm not sure. Ellen, do you want to speak to that? Maybe add a little bit more to your question if you're still on.
In other words, does Ellen, do you have your own business, or?
That's my guess. All right. Well, yes, her freelance services.
Oh, got it. Okay. That's what I thought. So Ellen, even I have trouble with this, and I empathize with you. I forget to say to people, like when I say I have a satisfied client, I wrote someone's resume and then they're like, Julie, thank you so much. And then sometimes I forget to say, oh, Ellen, if you don't mind, if you were happy with the service I provided, would you mind just keeping me in mind? And I really rely heavily on referrals. And so I would be so appreciative if you refer someone who needs a resume. And I've gotten it. Sometimes I forget to do that. When I do it, most of the time the person says, oh, sure, Julie, I'd be happy to do it. And sure enough, I get a referral. So get in the habit of asking for referrals, first of all, especially from satisfied clients. That's a good one. And then the other thing is just make sure you're really comfortable. It sounds crazy because you know what you do as a freelancer. Make sure you're really comfortable very succinctly talking about what you do so the other person understands. So say, is it all right if I describe to you what I do just in case you stumble across someone who might need what I do? I do bup, 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 bup. And then, get comfortable with that. And sometimes a lot of people just don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be hard to sell yourself, but it's a necessity, right? Especially if you are offering freelance.
What you do. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Nicole. You're selling what you do, not so much yourself. Yeah, it's you doing it, but it's like, this is something that someone needs and wants, And so that's what it's about. And someone will be very happy that you provided that service for them.
Absolutely. Okay, this question is from Erin. How much personal information should I share when networking? I know you said to avoid politics and religion, but is there other personal information that I should also avoid mention of?
Well, that sort of opens up the topic of your cancer diagnosis. I don't know if that's what's being asked, but people do often ask that question, and Nicole's an expert on this as well. And so I think it's really, you decide what you want to share. You have no control over how someone is going to, respond to you. You have no control over what someone's reaction is or what their experience has been with whatever it is. So you kind of, probably in the beginning, you want to be a little bit measured and a little bit careful, and not go down the TMI trail, So, but just think about what is, and not because, and you don't want to share information because it's important to you. You want to share information because you think it will be beneficial for that person to know, or it'll be beneficial to having them be able to help you most effectively. So that's the light in which you want to look at that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when it comes to your cancer diagnoses, you are the one to make that decision, and really thinking about how it plays into this specific topic of you as an employee and what you can do and your skills and your experience.
Right.
Obviously, it's just a little bit different because you're not necessarily interviewing with this person, but if you're using them to get a job, then that information is out there and it's not necessarily a confidential situation. So really thinking about what role it plays in all this information. And I think, thinking about in terms of other personal information, what kind of tidbits could you share with them that they could pass along and be like, oh, they're very interested in, I don't know, the outdoors, and we're an outdoors company, so this is really relevant, things like that, thinking about hobbies and how those could help. Just about being kind of creative and thinking about what role they would really play in getting a job.
And remember, if you're following the advice I gave you today, you're first asking that person about them and what are they interested in, what do they do? And that makes it a little easier for you to make that connection between you or what you know about what they, are interested in, rather than just talking about yourself right away or divulging things about yourself.
Right. And a lot of people do like to talk about themselves. So using whatever they share with you can be a really great way to get on their good side.
Right.
Okay. This next question is from Jeff. How persistent should I be? If I've sent a message on LinkedIn and know that they saw it but didn't respond, should I cross them off the list of people to network with, or would it be appropriate to send another follow-up message?
I mean, I'm all for follow-up. I mean, it really, you never know what's going on their end. You don't know if they were away. You don't know if they're really busy at work. You don't know if someone in their family is sick. It really usually has nothing to do with you. So my rule of thumb tends to be 3 times, but I don't mean 3 times in 1 week. I mean, sort of like, oh, you reached out to them. Hopefully you customized your, your conversation, your message rather, on LinkedIn. I mean, if you just send like, I'd like to connect with you, that's different. And then if like a couple weeks go by, then you could reach out again and say something, but think about what you could say that's different. And then if they don't, again, just say, hey, the final one is, I don't want to bother you, but I was so interested in talking to you if you have the time. And if they don't, they don't. And like I said earlier, if you don't have chemistry with everyone, and that's okay.
Right. So I guess going off of that, just my own question that comes off of that is, what should a kind of blindly sent message look like? Is there a length requirement? When is it too long? How much detail should you put in? Kind of that initial outreach with someone that you don't know. Is it better? Is less more in this situation, or do you feel that it would be better to give a little bit more information when you're doing that kind of cold?
Right. Yeah. So first of all, I like it to be sort of steps. So what I think the first step is, especially let's use LinkedIn, that's the easiest. So the first step is I send Nicole an invitation to connect with me, and I tell her why I want to connect with her. And it may just be, oh, Nicole, you and I know a lot of people in common. People say that to me a lot. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I look to see who we have in common. And then I'm like, okay, there's someone in the same circle, so good. Then I would reach out to Nicole and say, oh, Nicole, thank you so much for accepting my invitation to connect. I'll confess, I did target you for this reason, blah, blah, blah. And the good thing about LinkedIn is they count your characters. So you can't just, have these endless messages, but brevity is always better because people will only read so much. And then, at that point, if they don't respond, with the second one, you could be brave enough, like the question that Jeff asked, of reaching out one more time or not, that's up to you, or do it later down the road, or try to find someone who knows the person, So it's sort of connect the dots a lot on LinkedIn.
Okay. So I guess also going off of that, there's another question from Hannah asking, are there any people that we should specifically avoid networking with? Maybe, I don't know exactly who, but maybe like positions, titles, is it inappropriate to reach out to, the CFO versus, the manager of the organization?
It's, what I love about networking, it really is a level playing field. And so it's really just getting, especially on LinkedIn, but just getting over your level, your intimidation. If you have that, if you feel intimidated, remembering my point about, you're inclined to reach out to the CFO or CEO if you're comfortable, but more likely maybe a manager or senior director could be more helpful. So I would just say network with anybody whom you think it's logical, but just tell them why. The reason I'm reaching out to you is because you have history or experience in this, and a level, I don't think it really matters. Most people aren't hung up on what their level, oh, I'm a CFO, so I don't network with people below me. People don't really think that way. The only reason they might not respond is because they're busy.
Okay. Might also be a good idea, just if there are companies that you're interested in, or if you have been seeing job posts, seeing if there's anybody that put their name on the job post as someone to reach out to that you could potentially start networking with. Is that something that would be appropriate? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of what type of person you shouldn't network with. I really can't think of anybody that wouldn't be appropriate. And I like the idea, Nicole, that like if you are fortunate enough to find a name on a job posting, many times there's not a name. Yeah, absolutely. But just make sure you tell them that you're aware of the process. You're aware that you need to apply online, or that you have applied online. And the other thing I like to do is if there's a job, if you can't find the hiring manager, but you go to LinkedIn and you look at the company and you look at all the people that work there and you find people in recruiting, you know, you reach out to those people because they know who's hiring for that job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they know who the recruiter is, the in-house recruiter or the external recruiter who's responsible for filling that position. So that's a good person. And they're used to people reaching out to them, you know, and they'll look at your background and say, oh yeah, let me forward this. So.
For sure. We have another question. I'm a freelance artist and a friend connected me with some industry contacts who have offered to video call with me. I don't really have a great camera. My family's always home and I'm worried that they may judge me for my poor setup and the not great background. I can't really afford to get that technology right now and I'm worried that they may judge me for my home or my setup. So do you think it's appropriate to request a call instead, or do you think it's okay to just work with what I have and not worry about it?
Well, I think that it would, if you can find, for this particular thing, it's not like you have to worry about this every day. So if you can, for this particular situation, you could find a friend who has a better setup than, or a family member. There's always someone in your circle who has great technology, you know, then that's great. You can use, if you're using Zoom or you're using Teams or whatever, you can use one of their backgrounds. So your background isn't of that much consequence. So they don't even need to see your home because those are free, the backgrounds, you know? So, and if you're really uncomfortable, just say, you know, is it okay if we just speak on the phone? But what I will tell you is, I sometimes am video shy just because I'm burned out. And I'll say to people, instead of saying, may we speak on the phone, just say, I can do video or phone. Do you have a preference? And I find that when people are sort of pressed, they'll say, yeah, I prefer Zoom, or no, I don't, you pick, or yeah, I would rather have the phone. So you kind of want to make it seem as if it's their decision versus you saying, oh, I don't want to use video. You know, and then I guess the final thing I would say is what's important is your art, not what your background looks like, or, you know, they're not judging that, you know, that's your art is what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's focusing on what's important in these situations.
Yeah.
It can be challenging because you get overwhelmed by some of these stress emotions of it.
I got it. Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. How do I approach a second level connection who works at a company that has a relaunch program I'm interested in applying to, or that has an open position that matches my experience?
So you can reach out directly to, if you've reached out to your first connection and said, can you please reach out to your connection, who's your second connection, and they haven't helped you, or they've reached out to that person and that person hasn't responded to them. I don't see any harm in going directly to that person. And what I like about your question is that you can say, so-and-so is our common connection. And so I noticed that you work at ABC Company and you have a relaunch program. I'm extremely interested and would love to talk to you about whether or not there's a match. You know, so at least you have like a warmer kind of intro because you have that person in common, and you can only hope that that person is someone whom they respect or like, which in most cases would be the truth, you know, wasn't someone that beat them up when they were a child or something, you know. I'm joking.
Well, I hope that these were all helpful. You know, we are at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to start wrapping up. I really hope that you guys all found this webinar helpful. And as I mentioned, we really appreciate any feedback. So if you wouldn't mind filling out the online evaluation, we hope you'll take time to do so. It really helps us to develop this program. But even more so, it helps us to continue receiving the funding that we need in order to keep these programs free. If any questions come up for you after today, or if we didn't get to yours, please feel free to email us your question at cancerandcareers@cew.org. And once again, requirements for obtaining CEUs are found on this slide that's been up. Thank you so much to Julie for your insights as always. Thank you all for attending today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye, Julie.
Bye.